Welcome to episode number 11 of Excel Beyond Boundaries with Luca Pasquariello. And
Exactly. You got that right. Good
man,
job.
that's
It's
a
not
cool
an
last
easy
name.
last name.
That's a cool last name, Pasquariello. And who's a dietitian and also a fitness coach and a vegan. And we are here today to discuss all kinds of things. So, starting out, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
Oh, absolutely. So I know that you're in Switzerland, and you told me that your background is Italian, and you've been living in Switzerland. So that's cool to have a guest from overseas. So starting with your fitness journey, what inspired you to first begin your fitness journey?
This is really an interesting question for sure. I was always an active kid, and I can remember, we have to take it back to my childhood, basically, because back then I got inspired by my surroundings. I saw someone that walked around with a six pack at a really young age, and that had a really huge impact on, of course, many children surrounding him. And I just asked him, like, what do you do? And I do a lot of push-ups. And I started doing push-ups then. So that was a little bit that sparked the flame. That was a little bit of an ember, if you so will, of my fitness journey. And then from there I was always active. I did a bunch of different sports until I found my love doing calisthenics first. And then I stepped into the gym, and that was around seven years ago. But I always was really doing a lot of resistance training. So all in all, I've been doing like resistance training for 17 years now, something like that. Maybe in 18, counting this year since the new year started. So yeah, I've been at it for a really long time and I still love it. So
Good, good. Is fitness as popular in Switzerland? Because I know when I was in Greece last time, it wasn't as big, but it was getting there.
that's how you can probably describe it. To get a sense on how popular it's getting, I believe we almost have as many barbers in the city that I live as we have fitness or gym studios over here.
That's crazy.
To get a sense, I have to count it, but I live, well, you have to think about it. Different is a very small country. So if I talk about a city is basically like a town that has more than 10,000 inhabitants or a population over 10,000. That's probably like a nothing burger for you guys, I know, but for us Swiss people, it's kind of big. And I live in a city that has like 20,000 people living in here. A little bit above that. So, and we have around 5, 6 gyms in the surrounding area. So, yeah, it's getting up there. And especially people my age or younger, I'm actually, oh gosh, I have to start counting now. I'm getting older. So, no, I'm actually turning 34 this year. And yeah, people my age, most, not all, but a great majority of people actually starts lifting or does actually getting themselves involved in some kind of physical activity. So it's probably not to the same, doesn't actually can share the same popularity as in the US, probably from what I'm getting, from what I'm hearing from my clients. So, but it's getting up there.
That's cool. That makes sense. It's interesting how trends are different in different countries, and that's awesome. What does fitness ultimately mean to you, would you say? Since I know you got started about 17 years ago and you were inspired by seeing someone who was really fit, um, how would you say, what would you say fitness means to you? Because I know it's a lifestyle.
Yeah, that's a really deep question. I believe my passion actually started way after when I started doing my first push-ups. There was a period in which I was kind of like always nauseous, felt always nauseous after eating. Doctors couldn't really figure out what it was. I mean, I had an inflamed stomach and small intestine. Yeah, and kind of during that time, I swore to myself that once I get better, which I did, thankfully, after like a year, I will start pushing myself at the gym and I will start really enjoying every last minute of it. And that enjoyment is what I still feel today. Fast forward, like, yeah, that was right, really 17, 18 years ago before I truly started committing to resistance training. And that truly sparked my passion fully. And yeah, it kind of like went from a spark, an ember to a flame over the span of a year, actually. And I'm still enjoying that. And I'm one of those lucky people that is not only a dietitian, but I also encourage people to do kind of like do a lot of physical activities as well. And in order to do that, you have to have a knowledge because you're training and coaching people,
Oh
as you
yeah,
might know as well. You cannot just, tell them, well, just do some bench pressing and stuff like that. No, you have to know the techniques and stuff like that. And yeah, it's becoming way more than a passion. It's also one of my daily jobs, actually. And I'm really fortunate to do this.
that's cool. So it started with the stomach challenge, the stomach issue, and then when you got better, as you got better, you found your passion for fitness, and it just kind of developed into that flame that it is today. That's a
Exactly.
cool story, huh? And did you face any challenges early on aside from the medical? Were there any other challenges that you faced? Like any injuries or imbalances or setbacks, or was it pretty much kind of smooth sailing?
It was kind of lucky because the only injury I suffered during these 80 years was a shoulder injury after I did some really, really heavy pull ups. Actually, some heavyweight pull ups. And that actually was a reminder. That was, don't know, 10 years ago, maybe. I can't remember. It's been a long time. And the injury wasn't severe. I still trained legs for a week, and after weeks, I started training my upper body again. But I still felt my shoulder for half a year. But it went away gradually because that actually told me to look at something that back in the day, yeah, you heard the people say, look at your form, but most people were concerned about, lifting heavy stuff. And yeah, that was the primary reason that we had fun. And I was kind of like in a little bit lucky because I was more concerned about doing a lot of reps in my
Ah,
calisthenics days, and then started shifting to heavyweights. And then this happened, and that actually reminded me that, yeah, I should be more careful. And yeah, fast forward many years later, I actually look at that and feel like, well, that was a pivotal moment, actually, because if that didn't happen, I might actually got a more severe injury out of it if I were to pursue more ego lifting and stuff like that. And
oh yeah.
yeah, you can still do both. I actually lift heavy with great form and still enjoy the workouts. No need to impress others that actually don't really care about you.
That's true. That's true. Getting caught up in things that don't matter and focusing on what really matters. That's a good point. This is another deep question. I know I'm throwing the deep questions at you early on, but your fundamental why. I feel like it changes throughout people's fitness journey. So where are you now along your journey? Your fundamental reason for training. I kind of have an idea since you have such a solid fitness background and a passion for helping others. But what drives you to be consistent in the gym?
Yeah, you weren't kidding when you were starting with another deep question.
Yeah.
So I believe it used to be more like being being really grateful to life after, well, yeah, suffering is probably the right word for a year. And I'm still grateful to this date. And I believe we should always be careful to always remain grateful for what we have. Being able to walk, being able to speak and do daily tasks, which are normal for us and we see as normal, you only start to appreciate them usually when they're taken away from you or you are reliant on someone else. And that is something that I'm still carrying with me today. Try to be humble, be kind. Again, not always doable depending on the situation, but trying my best. And that has shifted my goal or mentality to gaining a lot of muscles, trying to be as healthy as I can, to being more focused on health nowadays. My mindset back in the day was I was really obsessive about the gym. And if you told me, Luca, we're going on vacation and we're going to do a trip tomorrow, we are waking up at 7 a.m. and we go to the trip, I would wake up at 4 and get my workout in. That was me. Nowadays, I would probably feel like, well, skipping even one day or even a whole week of training won't have much of an effect. We actually also have studies looking into this, starting to get studies. I'm just aware of 2 studies, I believe. This is kind of like how my mindset shifted from maximizing muscle growth and health to being more health focused nowadays and also not going crazy and being too obsessive about the gym. I mean, if I can, I'm always getting a workout in. I actually recently got the biggest break from working out that I ever got in my 18 years of training. A
Really?
whole week. A whole week of
A
training.
whole week. So
Yeah.
in 18 years of training, you only taken 1 week off.
Yeah. And
Wow.
I count cardios and leg trainings, of course, as well as in it, because I was so lucky that I never really got sick during those 18 years. And when I got sick, it was maybe a mild flu, nothing that hindered you from, going to the gym or maybe working out outside. I mean,
Nice.
yeah, during the pandemic, I also got COVID and stuff like that, but I felt okay. I was still going outside and stuff like that. Of course, as long as you could. In Switzerland, you were allowed to, but you had to be really careful. You also had to be maybe after some times if you were vaccinated and stuff like that. So you could actually go outside. So you have to be careful for those things. But I was really careful and could go outside and train and stuff like that. So yeah, the longest break was 1 week, and I really enjoyed it. I still did cardio though, so I'm not sure
Uh,
how much that counts. But 1 week of
yeah,
resistance training.
that's funny. I mean, and it's interesting that now they're having studies because I had the same mentality. I didn't want to take a day off when I was 18, 19, 20. But yeah, when you take a week off, it's like you often come back stronger. So it's sometimes, often come back stronger, but maybe a little less endurance. But it's funny how things have shifted in the industry.
Yeah. It's really also funny how certain things shift as we get older, more experience, and our look on life starts to change. Yeah, I believe also the results of these studies, but whether they were positive or negative, meaning pro or con, taking a break, yeah, I would still do it, honestly, because it's not going to make or break it.
Sure.
Consistency is key, that's the determining factor, but consistency doesn't mean you have to train 52 weeks a year. You can take a break if you want to.
That's great advice. Really. To have more of a balance, like you said, now you have more of a balanced lifestyle.
Exactly. I mean, this doesn't necessarily mean that you have to take or you can go on and take a break every now and so often, like maybe on a weekly basis or something like that. I mean, the crazy study was out of Japan that has a really crazy protocol. I can't recall it right now. It's been some years since I've read it, but I believe it went like this. It was 21, and they trained for 6 weeks and took a break for 3 weeks. No resistance training for 21 weeks. It lasted for 21 weeks, actually. And the control group was training straight through 21 weeks. And they found no significant differences in muscle growth, but only in strength, basically. Brad Schoenfeld and colleagues also did another study. I might got the weeks off, but I believe it was a 9 week or 10 week study. They did 4 weeks of resistance training, one cessation of training for a total of 1 week, and then did another 4 or 5 weeks of training straight through. Same results there, no significant differences between the intervention group and the control group in muscle growth, but they saw also a statistical significant difference in strength. So maybe for
Interesting.
powerlifter it might be a little bit more important to stay consistent, but yeah, most people are consistent. But if you want to take a break, by all means go and enjoy the vacations or the trip. If you don't want to train, that is. I mean, for all people like me that enjoy training anyways, even during vacations, by all means do that. Nobody's going to stop you. But if you want to take a break, if your better half is wanting you to go on a trip with her or him, by all means do so and enjoy the day and don't think about losing muscles, because losing muscles takes a really, really long time. There was, I believe, a study done on rugby players or football. Can't really remember. And they were looking at injured rugby players, probably it were rugby. And they saw that even after a week of remaining like really bedridden, it then started to show some sign, or after 1 or 2 weeks, I believe, they started to show some sign of muscle loss. However, being bedridden and being active on a trip, walking, whatever, it's different. And it might take way longer for you to lose muscle when you're still moving your muscles around and you don't do any resistance training. So,
Interesting. That's very motivating to hear for many people that they don't have to, be so relentless to have the progress.
absolutely. Again, if you want to have really great progress, you should take a break every now and then, I believe, especially if you're mentally fatigued or You need to reset and stuff like that. From do a gym detox, if you so will, and get back better with better motivation and stuff like that. For sure, that's very reasonable. But the most important thing is still being consistent throughout the year. That again, I'm repeating myself. I'm a broken record, but training 52 weeks straight through is consistent for sure. But I don't mean it when I say like consistency. Training 52 weeks straight through. What I mean by that is try to train on most weeks throughout the day, throughout the week, and enjoy it.
Yeah, like the big picture, basically, to be
Exactly.
consistent. I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Did you ever experience overtraining at all, or have anyone that you knew that experienced overtraining?
Wow, good question. So there was a period, and this is a pure anecdote. There was actually period in which I trained 7 days per
That's
week.
a lot,
Yeah, that
man.
was at the initial phase where the motivation was super high, and I was also engaging in a lot of calisthenics workouts, doing a lot of push-ups, squats, dips, pull-ups, you name it, the usual calisthenic stuff. And I felt good. I felt good. And then I tuned it down to 5 days resistance training. And nowadays I'm actually at 4. And I can see the power of abstaining from doing some resistance training nowadays. Now, I'm not saying you have to. Your body, if you get enough sleep, if you eat the right foods, especially antioxidant rich foods, seems to be really helping against sore muscle inflammation, stuff like that. Protein, of course, but everybody knows about protein. If you eat the right foods, you can truly you can get a lot out of your body. But just because you might not feel fatigued doesn't necessarily mean that you are maximizing muscle growth. That's two different questions. So I'm of the belief today that I believe you can actually I actually encourage all my clients to do at least 2 days no resistance training per week. Just be active, do cardio or something else during those days, but give your body some rest and your muscles a little bit from resistance training.
That's great advice. I know a lot of people in the industry get so excited and they just don't want to stop. And when I worked in group fitness, a lot of them would come. They were only supposed to come up to 4 days a week, and they would come every day. And I'd be like, "You're not supposed to come every day." I've experienced overtraining, and yeah, you're completely right. That's great advice for everyone, for sure.
Mind if I ask you, what symptoms did you have? Did you have some sleepless nights, some severe fatigue or tiredness, or
Yeah, it was. I was younger and I was doing a powerlifting routine, and the progress was so quick because I was doing low reps. I was doing like 5 by 5, and I was so excited how every week my numbers would go up. And you're normally not supposed to do it more than, like 12 weeks, with some rest built in, of course. And but 5, 6 days a week, I was just going in there so on schedule, but I just after the 12 weeks, I kept going and kept going and kept pushing, and I didn't want to stop. And then I got to a point where my numbers stopped, and then I started getting weaker, and I tried to fight it, and I got weaker and weaker and weaker, and I kept trying to fight it. And yeah, loss of appetite, lost weight, just brain fog, tired, and it took a long time to recover from that. Just from lifting heavy. I didn't realize how at that time how much that has a toll on your body. Just repeatedly lifting heavy, 4 or 5 times a week. Yeah, it was definitely took some time to recover from.
wow, that is really crazy and just goes to show that yeah, everything doesn't matter how good it is, can be overkill. I mean, even if we just talk about water, water is, of course, hopefully everybody knows that water is healthy for you, depending on the quality of water, of course. But yeah, you can also die from drinking too much water, for
That's a
sure.
good point.
So the same goes with training, right? Training is the magic pill. Like it's been linked to so many great benefits, health benefits, but you can overdo it for sure, for sure.
That's that's a great analogy.
So it's thanks for sharing that. Really interesting.
Oh no, definitely. I was gonna say, do you have one word that would you say represents your fitness journey? Like if you had to define your entire fitness journey in one word, what would you say that is? This is always interesting.
I said the word before. The first word that comes to my mind is consistency. Yeah, I believe that's it. If you were to put a gun to my head, which you don't do, you're a nice guy. But if you were to force me, like, Luca, give me a damn answer, consistency.
Consistency. Okay.
I've been super consistent. I don't know many guys that have been so consistent going to the gym and just enjoying it as I do for 18 years, like 1 week break. I'm not saying this to brag, but just to tell you and just to show you how much I love this sport and this journey, basically. And still do to this day. I have so much love. Although a lot of things are changing from the mindset, I'm still enjoying it.
That's beautiful. Really, to love the industry and what you do so much, to be that consistent, that is a beautiful thing. Is there a fitness myth that you've come across that you used to believe that now you've debunked? Because I know the industry has so many misconceptions over the years. What is one that you would hear often?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. Where should we start? Well, being a vegan, I believe maybe I would be remiss to say that or not to mention this. There's a really strong belief outside that plant proteins are inferior to animal-based proteins. And I also used to believe that because the data we had not too long ago, about 4 or 5 years ago now, was mostly based on rodents, pigs, and in vitro studies. In vitro is referring to cell studies usually. And not a lot of human studies, and the human studies we had were omnivorous people with taking either whey protein or soy protein on top of it. And that's not really telling to, to a vegan that just eats 100% plant-based proteins. I mean, an omnivorous person still eats animal-based products, and whether you add soy protein powder on top of it or not, it's not really telling. You cannot really replicate and extrapolate these results and apply them to a 100% strictly plant-based person. And I also believe that, but then 3 trials came out during the last 5 years that changed my point of view. And I know you mentioned I'm vegan, so maybe the listeners are more inclined to think that, oh, it seems biased and stuff like that. And to that, let me preface this by saying we are all biased. We all have our biases. And
True.
usually those saying, I don't have a bias, have the biggest bias from my interactions with these people. So I'm aware of my bias, but I try to put the vegan glasses away, or contact lenses, which I'm wearing right now, put them away and look at the science objectively. And these 3 trials are really well done. So the 3 trials were from Roberts and colleagues, Lorraine and colleagues, and Montaigne and colleagues. They all had slightly different designs, but in a nutshell, to not maybe bore your people talking about the designs and stuff like that too deeply, they all compared strict plant-based eaters or even habitual vegans in the Lorraine studies, matched them for protein. So the protein they used within these trials was mostly 1.6 to 2.0 grams per 1 kilogram of body weight. For all the Americans listening, 1 kilogram is the equivalent of 2.2 pounds of body weight. And they put into the same amount of workout designs. They measured everything. The measurements were really great. Like, it was just not looking at them and like, oh yeah, you got objectively more muscles on you. No, they measured everything with ultrasounds,
Exact.
MRI, even certain studies. So really gold standard measurements, like really good stuff. And they saw no significant differences between the group after 10, 12 weeks duration, actually. And that was really telling to me, actually. So there was even a control group which used less protein, 1.1 pound, if you calculate it in the supplemental material. There was this WOP meat trial from K. Roberts. They had a whole food plant-based group in there. Yeah, that was really interesting, actually. And I was just referring to myself sometimes, but I was never telling people, oh, plant proteins are equal to animal-based proteins when it comes to muscle growth. But because I don't like using anecdotes, not even myself. I mean, you can scroll through my social media and you will never hear me mentioning my story that I shared about being nauseous and stuff like that. Well, never. Maybe if you go back years, I've mentioned it once, or just maybe like on the side, but I never use it as definitive proof because anecdotes are, yeah, we should be really careful about sharing anecdotes. But yeah, this was basically a myth that looking at the totality of evidence, it points towards plant proteins. If you at least get 1.6 grams of protein per 1 kilogram of body weight in, seems to be the protein source doesn't seem to matter. And this is not just the opinion of a vegan. The scientists weren't vegans. I mean, just one of them is, but all the other in the teams, I can't say for sure. I don't know them, but I know a couple of them are not. Also, certain scientists, protein scientists like Philip Stewart, for example, or others as well, now have come around, and like Alan Aragon, for example, and many others, scientists that especially are have their expertise in protein and muscle growth and stuff like that, they change their point of view, like stating that, yeah, those dosages, those amounts, these studies seem to suggest that plant proteins are truly not inferior, but can be equally as good building muscles.
Powerful.
It's truly powerful, and of course, as a vegan, you like to see that. But I also have to jump or hit the brakes a little bit and tell people, okay, it's 3 studies, 3 promising results replicated by different scientist teams using different demographics, using different people and measurements and stuff like that, different elaborated or evaluated in different labs. Absolutely, but we should always be kind of like aware of the fact that it's 3 studies, and who knows, maybe 5 new studies will come out in the next 5-6 years, and they will point the fingers towards animal-based protein being better. I'm still open to the idea. This myth is continued to persist because, yeah, it's very recent, these findings. Not everybody has heard about them. And what's also true is that animal-based proteins are more amino acid dense than plant proteins. That's absolutely true. But that threshold is becoming meaningless if you hit these kind of like protein targets, basically.
I see. So more, if you have more protein, it makes up for that.
Yeah. There's certainly a threshold in which plant proteins are inferior, to be objective. We don't know what the threshold is yet. So it becomes more relevant to people that don't need a lot of calories or live in, I don't know, really poor countries maybe and don't have a lot of things to eat. Then, yeah, for those people, it might be important to focus more on animal-based proteins if you don't eat a lot of calories. But I'm guessing for people like you and me, or all the people listening to this podcast, hopefully, we can eat a lot of calories if you want to, and also quite a lot of protein. So for us, it doesn't seem to matter that much if you eat 1.6
I
grams.
see. That's really interesting. I did not know that. That's very interesting. And I like the way that you're not biased at all. If the truth is the truth, you're open to that. But currently they've proven that it's equal. That's cool.
Exactly. That's the current consensus. I'm being open-minded. Again, I don't want it to change because I have my bias as being a vegan, but I'm open to change my point of view and also make some posts on social media. I also called out certain vegan doctors, which clearly went against the totality or the total body of evidence with their claims on my posts as well. And I believe we should look at science objectively and not try to manipulate the findings in order to suit our biases. That's something that we should all be doing more. And yeah, that's definitely something that was working in favor for vegans. Lucky us. But yeah, as I told you before, 3 studies, it's not going to make or break it. We need more studies to confirm these findings in different populations. And yeah, for us, we shall see what the future holds. But as of right now, that those 3 studies are the strongest evidence we have, and I feel like it's fair to say that there's no differences, at least as of yet.
Awesome. And that was very well said. I'm glad to have learned something that fact. It's a very powerful fact. Interesting. I have a lot of questions when it comes to the diet section, but I'm gonna ask one last one. With this section is gonna be if you could give one piece of fitness advice or advice in general to someone just starting their journey, what would it be, would you say?
I would say protein is important for muscle growth. However, the plant proteins are not just good for, well, not just kind of like seem to kind of like give you the same muscle growth at certain doses. But if you look at substitution analysis, meaning if you take huge populations and you look at plant proteins versus animal-based proteins and you lump them all in together, we can see a huge benefit occurs at people eating more than half of their plant proteins in general from plants. Right now, the population consumes around 75% of animal-based proteins and 25% of plant proteins. We would see a huge benefits in many, many chronic diseases risks, or kind of like dropping if people were to adopt more or kind of like went more towards plant-based proteins like 75% and still have room left for animal-based protein if they want to.
I
Nothing
see.
speaks against that. Yeah, that's one of my pushbacks where people, a lot of vegan doctors will tell you that every single gram of animal-based protein is, the devil, will kill you, whatever. That's not true. There's many. What we usually see in science is a pattern. And that pattern consists of whole food plant-based, primarily as the base, and there's still room left for animal-based products. Yeah, as a vegan, again, I try to be objective, but what I usually observe is red meat, unprocessed red meat, we see risk increases, people consuming more than 100 grams of unprocessed red meat per day, or around 80, 100 grams, which is still quite a lot if you think about it. That's like,
Yeah, that's a lot of meat in a day.
yeah, that's quite a lot of meat if you think about it, especially if you eat meat not every day, like 2 times per week. That's a good amount of meat you can actually take in there. So the risk usually increases above thresholds of 80 to 100 grams of unprocessed red meat per day. Processed red meat is far lower at around 50 grams per day. That's what we usually see. Dairy is a very interesting kind of like subject to talk about, because there's many different types of dairy. There's full fat dairy, there's butter, there's Greek yogurt and stuff like that. What we usually see, however, is low-fat dairy or fermented dairy products are quite health promoting at 1 or 2 servings per day for sure. That's what we
Nice.
see the best results in. Fish, especially salmon, tuna, all the fatty fish, really health promoting, and it's really consistently associated with great health benefits as well. Eggs is something where a lot of scientists still have a great debate about today.
I remember it was back and forth for years.
Yeah, and I've analyzed the data myself because there's a recent debate going on in the German-speaking part of Europe. There's a very prominent person that I admire and respect a lot that has a very strong opinion about eggs, and I happen to disagree. So what we usually see in data that, I don't know how technical you want me to be, but...
As much as you like, this is fascinating.
Okay, great. So if you look at the data, that shows that eggs usually are not associated with increased risks for chronic diseases like cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes and so on and so forth. What usually happens in those studies, and I've had so many heated discussion about this on social media, it's really interesting. But so far, if you look at these studies that don't see an association or null findings, meaning either an increase or decrease risk, so non-significant findings, they adjust for cholesterol. Adjusting means you're adjusting for confounders. So if you, for example, drink coffee and you smoke, and I look at you as a population and I see coffee, okay, coffee is associated with cardiovascular disease and lung cancer.
I see.
Go figure. But once I adjust for smoking, that goes away. What are eggs known for? Cholesterol.
Cholesterol.
So why are you adjusting cholesterol and ruling that out as a confounder? It doesn't make much sense. Doesn't really make much sense. So if you want to see whether eggs have an impact on cardiovascular disease, don't adjust for cholesterol. See what happens to people that consume more or less eggs and even out the fields, but don't adjust for cholesterol. Also, in nutrition, something really key, a key question you have to ask is compared to what? Eggs are better compared to what? Refined carbs, processed meats, but how do they fare against nuts, whole grains? Usually when you do this substitution analysis, we see a decreased risk if you replace eggs with whole grains and nuts, for example. So we should be really careful, and if you start looking at all the trials and meta-analysis and systematic reviews and look at the studies included, it becomes pretty clear that a lot of them adjusted for cholesterol, compared eggs to others, or the dose. What's high in this study? That's something really common that you see happening in a lot of studies. What's the definition of high in this study? If you look it up, sometimes you see high is X per week. Like, is it really high?
Yeah,
Well, it's
that's
not really
nothing.
high, you know? So if you look at all these three things, adjusting for confounders, that is over adjusting, in my opinion. Compared to what? Question. And also looking at examples such as I explained like earlier, basically, it becomes clear. Once a study doesn't do this and doesn't really, or takes all these 3 points into consideration, we can see an increased risk at over 1 egg per day consumptions, usually. So if you keep egg consumption at 4-5 eggs per week, we usually don't see a lot of risks increases
I
in
see.
chronic diseases. But if you go above that line, we start to see an increased risk. There was
Interesting.
a very neat study that was not released too long ago that actually took measurements and tried to adjust for both. They looked at different cohorts actually, and what they also did was basically they also adjusted for cholesterol actually. And once they did, they saw that their findings without adjusting for cholesterol were actually significant. But once adjusting for cholesterol, again, without adjusting, significant findings, eggs showed increased risk. With adjusting, no significant differences.
Interesting.
That was a really interesting study, basically. And yeah, so what's also really common in these studies, again, we are getting really technical, is you're using a population that has a high intake of dietary cholesterol already. And we know about thresholds of going from 0 to 600 milligrams of dietary cholesterol. That's, I believe, 2 large eggs or 3 large eggs. Don't hold me to that. I can't recall, but 2 or 3 eggs, something like that per day. We can see an average increase of LDL cholesterol of around 10 milligrams, basically. So dietary cholesterol does have an impact, but more like saturated fat has a way bigger impact on LDL levels.
I see.
However, there's also hyper and hypo responders to dietary cholesterol, meaning people that can absorb a lot of dietary cholesterol and people that don't really absorb cholesterol at all. There was actually a really elegant study done that looked at studies that tested people for these genetic mutations, actually. And you can literally see that people that are hyper responders, I can't recall how many of the populations are, I believe 20%. Don't hold me to that, it might be more, it might be less. Once they eat even 1 egg or 2 eggs, like their LDL cholesterol drops, or goes up like, not drops, goes up like crazy. Hypo responders, on the other hand, don't really seem a lot of a change happening.
So
So
many factors. That's interesting.
exactly. It's really complicated when you talk to people. And that is why when I have a client, I just tell them like, okay, let's assess what you're eating. And if they're eating a lot of eggs, I look at their blood work to see how does their LDL cholesterol look like. If it's fine is under 100 milligrams per deciliter, preferably under 90 or 80. Not many can get there, but if it's under 100, already thumbs up. Yeah, if it's that low, great. If it's not, we can see what we can tweak about. Usually I'm targeting the saturated fats first. Not saying it's an enemy, saturated fats. You want to keep them at around 8-10% of your total energy. So for most people, it's around 22 grams, 25 grams, less than that. Yeah, if you do that, and if the LDL cholesterol still is up and they're still eating a lot of eggs, then yeah, I'm telling them to reduce their egg intake and see what happens. And maybe, again, always be careful with what people are replacing the food you're telling them to stop eating. So
True, true.
eggs, you might want to throw in maybe some tofu or maybe some nuts. So Again, I also know plenty of people that eat 1 or 2 eggs per day and their LDL cholesterols are fine. Yeah, so we also have to be really mindful of all these changes. So I'm giving you this really huge answer to tell you that this is why there's so much confusion online on nutrition.
Very complex subject.
Exactly. And you really have to know the field to look out for. Because
Absolutely.
I can point out easily to more studies showing no association with egg consumption, and just a bunch of studies that took all these things into consideration and actually showed an increased risk. But so far, and I engaged with a lot of people, none has actually shown me a study that took all these factors into consideration and showed null findings.
I
So
see.
again, I'm not dying on this hill. I'm open-minded. I don't,
Yeah.
although my personal views, again, I have my bias, like we all have, but I'm open to be pointed out to other research and tell me like, well, okay, you didn't look at this, or like, oh yeah, you're right. But so far, all the studies I've read have shown an increase in risk. So I tell people be a little bit careful. Again, no need to blast yourself full with eggs, but if you want to have it, by all means do so, but check your blood work.
I like that though, that you're open to growth, you're open to the truth and learning more and insight, but at the same time, you don't accept studies for what they are. You want to dig deeper because there are so many corrupt studies that are not accurate. And we've seen that in different industries, how, certain industries pay for studies that are in their favor. And so I like the way you're simply trying to dive deeper and get the facts and then provide the truth to people. So I respect that. And that's really interesting what you're saying. So would you agree that there's some genetic factors where there's like a general foundation of how people should eat, and then there's like certain genetic factors where some people can have a little more meat or a little more eggs, some people can't handle that much. Is that pretty much to sum it up? And then I wanted to ask you, so you said that by switching the consumption of red meat, so instead of being mostly red meat, if they're mostly plant-based and then have a little bit of